All right, welcome to the show, Mr. Alan Harris. How you doing today?
I'm very good, Ron. How about yourself?
I'm doing wonderfully well, and I thank you again for taking time out of your busy schedule. I mean, you work with me full time. I mean, you work in the industry a lot, so I just appreciate you taking the time to be here and do the show.
Of course, and thank you so much for having me on.
Hey, thank you. So I usually like to start the show, Alan, with a icebreaker. This icebreaker is kind of to get us, you know how icebreakers do. They get us flowing, get us ready. So the icebreaker for us is basically talking about how we first met. And we met in the virtual space first, right?
Yes.
Tell me about that experience. I know I'm not like a normal guy to work with. So how was that experience jumping in and working with me at Full Sail?
So I'm going to back up just a little bit, just a couple days, actually. James Bailey is a good friend of mine. He was in the position before me. So I was kind of getting pseudo trained by him, just some of my responsibilities and everything. And one of the first things he told me is, hey, you're going to be working with this awesome guy named Ron. And I'm going to answer all the questions you have, but I really think that you're going to have a great relationship with him. And I'm like, okay, I'm looking forward to this. And first time I met, I'm like, yep, he was 100% right. So first time I met, you were super energetic, answered every single one of my questions. And ever since, just we hit the ground running, and I'm super proud of that. Yeah, we have a great relationship now.
Thank you. Yes, James totally buttered that up. And I'll be honest, you know, when I heard that we were bringing on some new experience, beautiful talent, I was a little worried because, you know, they were saying they were moving James on. And so I'm like, oh, man, how y'all going to do this now? You know, I'm just getting this bond with James. Now you're going to move him on. But, man, when I say, like, you make it hard to miss James. And I know he may hear this episode, but you make it hard to miss James. So he did a great job preparing you. And like I say, you took this position and just took it to the next level. And it's just been so amazing. And now James is on the course director side helping out with us this month. So it's been great. You know, it's been a wonderful blessing, man, to have you both. So that's great. We also, our first time meeting in person. Do you remember that?
Yes, that was helping out another friend of ours, Ryan Funk, with volunteering at the, I forget what it was. It was a summer camp for kids. I forget where the venue was, but that was the first time meeting in person.
Yeah, the Rep Theater.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yep.
So that was an amazing experience to meet you in person. And then we actually did kind of like a lecture for the kids together. So it was just kind of like a full circle, you know?
Yep.
So what's amazing about Alan, Alan is usually helping me with my lectures that I do at Full Sail. So he's always at my lectures and there and helping me out and just making sure everybody's good and they go smooth. And so to have this experience to meet you in person and then we're doing a lecture live, it was just like, this is a full circle for us. But that was amazing, man. I appreciate everything you do for me. You definitely make my job so much easier, Alan. So thank you so much, man, for being that guy. And I'm like, I'm ready to get on set so we can work on some projects together because I know that's going to bring it even further, you know, than we can imagine. So, but first question for you, man, what inspired you to pursue a career in the film and television industry?
So growing up, I always kind of thought that I'd land somewhere in the entertainment industry. Originally, I actually wanted to pursue a career in something like 3D animation. My dream was always working for Pixar out in California. Nice. But growing up, I kind of figured out that I just didn't have the talent that I think I needed to be in that position. So that was at a young age. I was around 12 or 13. I decided that. But from there, I'm like, you know what? I still want to make films. I still want to do this type of stuff. So a local church of mine was starting to kind of beef up their video audio department. They brought on a guy who was really big in that field and really liked doing it a lot. So 13-year-old me was a little too nervous. I showed interest to my parents. I'm like, hey, I'd love to do this. So my parents kind of dropped me in front of this person, like, hey, this is Alan. I think you'll like him. And then they walked away. And I'm like, oh my gosh, what are you doing to me? But best thing they could have done to me. So hit it off with this guy. He was really, really cool. He was in his like early mid 30s. Again, I was only like 13 at the time.
Wow.
And ever since then, I'm like, okay, I really like doing this type of stuff.
Hmm.
From there, kept doing it. Eventually heard about Full Sail through some friends of friends, and I'm like, you know what? I think I should start considering actually doing this as a career. Um,
Wow.
so
Okay.
I set up a behind the scenes tour in Full Sail, I think 2014. I
Hmm.
also had an interview, not an interview, like a behind the scenes tour at the Art Institute of Jacksonville
Okay. Hmm.
for the next day. So we made the trip down here, went to Full Sail behind the scenes, and that evening I called the Art Institute and said, "Nah, I'm good. I don't need to go to you guys." And I think I signed the
Right.
papers. I think then later on that week, after just going over the finances and stuff.
Hmm.
Yeah, and went
Nice,
from
man.
there.
And tell us too, tell our listeners, where are you from?
So I'm originally from Johnstown, Pennsylvania. It's about an hour
Hmm.
and a half, 2 hours outside of Pittsburgh, Western PA.
Hmm.
So not a lot of. I've been up and down the East Coast as a kid, coming down to Florida, of course, Disney World for the vacations, but not a lot of
Hmm.
traveling, not a lot of time away from home. So it was a pretty big leap to move by myself
Yeah.
down to Florida all by myself, no family, no friends down here. So
Right.
yeah, those first month or two was pretty rough for me. First time on my own, but
Hmm.
quickly made some friends and real quickly became a really good experience, really good time being down here.
Nice. So, what would you say for those students that maybe in your case, like they live outside of Florida and maybe they live in a totally different place where their college is actually located? Like, how do you prepare yourself to move so far away from your family in cases like that?
Sadly, I don't know if there's much preparation if you're about to do it. Just be
Mhm.
prepared that it's going to be harder than you think. So I guess getting that mindset of, okay, it just because I'm having a hard time, just because it's been a month and a half, I'm still having a hard time doesn't mean you're failing,
Mhm.
especially if you don't have a lot of experience like I did being away from home. That's
Mhm.
just very natural. And then eventually
Yeah.
you're going to grow to love it because you're
Right.
finally on your own. You're getting to do these really cool things, especially if you're going to a college that you love the work you're starting to do. It's gonna get a really exciting after the first few months. So just stick with it, and it's gonna be harder
Nice.
than you think.
Nice. And I know when I left, when I graduated from high school, I went to the University of Florida, and I just remember the campus being so big, so many students, and I'm just like, how am I going to do this? And eventually, like you say, you get used to it. You make a lot of friends, and you eventually you start to love it,
Hmm.
and just being out on your own and growing and maturing. So, no, I applaud you, man, for taking that big leap to come down to Florida, for Full Sail. So that's amazing. So tell us about your experience at Full Sail. So did you right away knew exactly what position you wanted to do when you came to Full Sail, or how was that experience?
So initially, like many students, I really wanted to get into camera department. I really love the idea of the tech of camera department. I'm a really big tech guy. I really like the idea of finding that perfect image, that the perfect it's escaping me right now.
Hmm.
A contrast in an image. I loved all that type of stuff. But
Nice, nice.
um sound was always in the back of my mind because again, in during those volunteer church days, for whatever reason, sound was what I
Hmm.
gravitated towards back then. I just liked the
Right.
behind the scenes problem solving of sound as well.
Hmm.
So I believe my first project um in the bachelor's degree was as a first AC, pulling focus and everything, and I really liked it. But at the same time, for that same project, no one wanted to do sound.
Hmm.
So we didn't have a sound person. So we had
Oh
to get an
wow.
outside student doing sound.
Hmm.
So there was a day we didn't have sound because, of course, he was also picking up his own classes he had to do.
Hmm.
So again, there was the day that I'm like, okay, no one's doing sound. I'll give my second AC the day to have first AC. It's a slow day anyway. We only had like
Hmm.
4 or 5 shots planned since it was the final day, and I picked up sound. So
Wow.
around that time is when I'm like, you know what? If I really want to do this for a career, if I really want to pursue this, it seems like no one wants to pick up this sound position. So I kind of think it might be the same way outside of school. So I kept going, learning everything I could. Something I really loved about the bachelor's degree at the time, and it might still do this, I'm not too sure,
Wow.
but they really taught every department equally. Of course, some classes only had a month or two, and then other classes had, 4 or 5 months dedicated to it. But you got a good grip on everything. So I'm very proud that I was able to learn everything I could about grip, electric, camera, lighting, art. Of course, there's some things that I'm better at and some things I'm worse at, especially like art department and things like makeup, like working with my hands. I just, for whatever reason, fell short. But yeah, sound is what I just kept doing. And eventually I decided about 3 months from graduating, I'm like, hey, you know what? This is something I think I'm going to try. Decided to get a little loan from my parents, around $10,000, build my first kit. Fortunately, I was blessed enough that they were in a position to be able to, lend me that money, which is hard for a lot of students. I know that that first initial amount of money is scary, and I don't suggest it for students that aren't in the position. And it's not even something that's necessary. It's just something I felt like it's something I had the opportunity to do, and I felt like it was the right choice for me. That doesn't mean it's the right choice for everyone. It's just something that I felt the calling to do. So I decided to go for it. And I think it was about 3 days after, I built my kit, all the packages came in. I got a call from one of my lab specialists who said, hey, did you end up buying your kit? I'm like, yep. And he's like, awesome, because I have a person looking for a student open for a gig who owns gear. And I'm like, I'm your person. Let's go.
Perfect timing, man.
Yeah.
What an amazing, man. It's why I love this show so much. I get to know my I'll call you my brother. I get to know more about you, you know what I'm saying? And anyone who I work with and bring on the show, it's just so amazing to learn this stuff, you know what I'm saying? Because there's a lot of stuff we don't get to learn about each other when we're teaching together. So that's why it's so amazing. I would have never known that, Alan, man. What an amazing journey and story, man. What's something that you wish you would have known prior to starting your career?
Something I wish it's honestly something I still need to be better at. And it's just because you stumble, just because you fail, just because you don't make every client happy doesn't mean you're not progressing. Just like those things that hurt at night, whenever you come home at the end of the day and it's like, man, I really should have done better in this area. I really should have, tried harder in this one particular part of the scene or whatever. As long as you take it as constructive, as long as you don't just beat yourself with it or just blow it off, that means you're growing. And that's what's important. That's what's going to make you, that's literally what separates someone who's been doing it for a year from someone who's been doing it 8 years, is all of those experiences. So just keep going. And going back to making everyone happy, there's going to be times where, you know what, you might have not done anything wrong. You did everything right. Just for whatever reason, you didn't vibe with that director, producer, client, talent, and that's okay. So just keep moving. Sometimes there's not anything to learn. Sometimes you did the best job you could. They just didn't either like you or they expected more than your rate. Because just because you're 3 years working, you still don't know everything. So if someone, hires you at a reduced rate because you've just started out and they expect the world, that might be their problem. They might be expecting too much for what they're paying for. So just be like, you know what, one day I might be able to make that person happy. And then you have to think to yourself, but is that person worth working with? So as you develop as, a professional, luckily you get to make those choices more and more. You're like, nah, I'm not getting the vibe from that person. I'm doing well this month. I can pass. I'm good. So that's something to look forward to as you grow as a professional too.
It's amazing you're talking about this. I'm reflecting because I just did a episode called Closed Doors, and it's all about God closing doors that maybe we're not supposed to go through, or maybe like in this situation, you obviously, he don't want you working with certain people, so he closes that door so you can move on to something better. And so
Exactly.
that's what I'm thinking. I'm like, wow. So, but no, that's amazing. Were there any odd jobs you had to do to survive in this season, as you were, trying to get gigs and stuff?
Oh, definitely. So luckily because I was in a position that I could kind of spend the money I did at the beginning, I kind of skipped this normal progressional step. Of course, starting out, you need to take any job you can. And most of the time that's a PA, that's someone going and getting the donuts, that's someone holding that door. So I was very blessed and fortunate enough to kind of skip over a lot of that work and jump right into the department I wanted to do, because it's really hard. And you have to realize it's just because now you've switched from, okay, I've done my grind as a PA. I'm now moving into the either editing assistant or sound utility or camera utility or whatever, or even a grip. I'm now in my department. You're still at the lowest point of the totem pole for that department. So now you kind of have to start all over again. Yes, you're finally doing that camera job you've always wanted to do, but now you need to accept all of the jobs for the camera department that no one else wants to take because it's kind of a shitty job. Oh, I'm sorry, kind of a bad job.
Good.
So luckily I was able to kind of skip over that. There's definitely times where I still had to go back, take some PA jobs whenever, what, I needed a student loan payment and, I only was able to get one job that month. And I'm like, oh, shoot. Okay, reach out to some producer friends. I need a PA job real fast. So in that first 3 years, that is something you're going to have to do. And even as now going back to talking about the lowest person on the totem pole for that department, starting out as a sound guy, I had to take those jobs that no other sound guy in the area wanted to take because they were the least paying. It was with a notorious producer. It was long hours. It was overnight shoots. And that's really tough. And I would say to most people, for the first year of that professional period of your life, you pretty much have to say yes to everything because you don't know who's going to be at that job. You don't know who's going to remember your name. You don't know how that will get you to that next job. But if you're not saying yes, it never will get you to that next job.
Wow.
And there's many jobs where I took that, it was at the end of the day, it was a 12-hour day, ended at 12 p.m. at night or 12 a.m. at night, I guess. And then the next job needed to start up again at 4 a.m. in the next day. And I'm like, oh, shoot. Now, of course, if you're feeling like it's not safe to drive, you should not take those jobs. But if it's just as much as, oh man, I'm really tired, but I need to take this, and you feel up to it, you need to take that job because you might impress that producer, which I was fortunate enough to do. I impressed that producer and he's like, hey, I'm sorry, this job, shifted earlier in the day. Do you want me to take you off of it? And I'm like, nope, I'll just drink an extra Red Bull that day. And that next day he made it a point to come up to me and say, hey, you know what? That was really cool of you to take, because that would have been a really pain in the butt to try to replace you last second, even though it wouldn't have been your fault. So again, that was hard. It was a hard day, especially after 12-hour day. I was lucky enough that I was able to do it. Like I said, it wasn't unsafe for me to drive. But I made an impression and I got work because of it. So it's hard, but just keep on the grind.
Yes. Now, you did tell us about your first, your gig, getting that gig right away. Was that a paid gig or was that just a work for hire?
Fortunately, that was a paid gig. For my rate, for my day, I believe it was a 10-hour day, if I'm remembering correctly. With my gear, I think I got paid $300 for the day, which is nothing.
Yeah.
With the gear I owned. But
it's a blessing to get a sound guy with gear for that. I'll be honest.
So, but again, first job I ever did, I'm like, you know what? Yes. And I will say I learned more in that first job than the 3 years I did at Full Sail, because that real world experience is priceless. I learned, I need to learn how to make an invoice, because I'm like, oh, wait, how do I get paid for this? I don't know. I learned negotiating rates. I, talked them up from $250 to $300. So I'm like, okay, I got a little bit of this experience now.
Okay, sweet.
So I learned, how to properly mic up people in not the best circumstances. Of course, in Full Sail, we have the luxury of having our own sound stage with a green room. This was in the lobby of a hospital. So I'm like, oh, okay, this is run and gun stuff now. This isn't pampered. Right. This isn't pampered film anymore. This is ENG. So a lot of great experiences for not a lot of money, but it was something. Like you said, a lot of people, you don't even get the first job you ever take out of school being paid. So that was a blessing that I was able to get paid for my first ever job.
Oh yeah, definitely. Now, tell us about the job that you finally got. That was the one that you was just like, this is what I can get used to. This is the type of pay that I'm happy with. Tell us about that one.
So my favorite types of jobs are there's two. My easiest, coziest types of jobs are usually talking head interview, which is someone just sitting in front of a camera with a person asking questions off to the side of the camera. So one person live using a boom buddy, which is just a boom holder on a C-stand, right out of frame. The frame pretty much looks like this. So you have not even like 4 inches above talent. So your boom gets in there nice and clean. So putting on the lav is just optional. You don't even need it. You're sitting in a hotel room with air conditioning, and there's an interview about, every 45 minutes, and each interview only lasts 15 minutes. And it's like, oh my gosh, I'm getting paid for this. Like, those are so easy. But, as long as you're with a good fun crew of like 3 or 4 guys, it's a lot of fun, but it does get boring pretty quickly. Now, the job I love doing is jobs that are high energy, a nice, usually around 8-person crew, a lot of a group of good people you really love working with, where it's a perfect balance of high energy. You really don't have a second to kind of think about anything other than the job, but not to the point that you're worried about dropping things because you're so rushed. You're not doing a good enough job. That's my favorite type of day, is when you're really, really busy, 10-hour day, everyone's in a groove, but nothing that you're sacrificing the quality of anything for.
Right. That's awesome. Awesome, man. So tell me about a time you failed, and how did you overcome that experience?
So my biggest failure was a job at Hollywood Studios. It was advertising the Disney After Dark promotion that they were doing before COVID. This was probably 2.5 years before COVID, maybe even 3. Okay. And it was a mixer that was kind of relatively new. I recently upgraded. It was about 3 months old, and an update came out for it. So I did the update, and what the update did was included something called pre-roll, which means it's constantly recording, and when you hit the record button, it saves the last however many seconds you set, usually up to a minute, but usually you set it to around 10 seconds, just in case you miss like the sticks clap because you forgot to record, or just in case your producer's like, oh, catch this really fast, this person started talking out of nowhere. So that's the purpose of pre-roll. So anyway, what has happened was I updated this, put on the setting, because why wouldn't I? And my mixer decided that it wanted to flip what it was supposed to do because of a glitch in the update. So what it would do is it would only save the 10 seconds of pre-roll and then instantly stop recording everything else. My mistake was, throughout the night, I decided not to double check. I didn't click on anything, so it was 100% my fault. You need to be, especially if you have it so easy that it's just a click of a button, you can see everything you recorded. That is on you as a professional to be making sure that this is happening. So sadly, about 3 hours of the night just wasn't recorded, none of it. And I'm like, oh my gosh, I can't believe that this happened again. There was a really good reason, but it doesn't matter. You're the sound guy. you're hitting the record button, and if it's not recording,
right, ooh,
it's your fault. So
right.
the thing that initially
Oh, man.
saved my butt from that was a really solid relationship with the producer. If I would have messed up, another time after that within short succession, that wouldn't have saved me at that point. It's like, no, you're too much of a liability at that point. But so the thing that saved me was doing those favors, hey, maybe this day did go over by an hour. I'm not charging you overtime. You're my friend. Doing the jobs no one else wanted to do. Always, trying my best to be really nice and polite on set. So the thing that saved me was really cool producer, and that my camera guy was nice enough to have on his camera a little like reference shotgun mic. Again, it was all talking head interview, so he was never more than 4 to 8 feet away. So not the best sounding, really kind of, generic camera sound, but it was still captured. And then finally, my promise to that producer that this would never happen again. I would always double check. And then also me showing him the receipt of me purchasing a backup recorder, which was just a little mini backup recorder that now always sits in my bags, and I always hit record as alongside.
Wow, right?
Yeah.
But
that was a rough night. That was a rough night.
Sound like a rough week.
It was.
Wow, man, that's a story for the books, man, I will say. So Alan, what are some key elements that every filmmaker should have when working with other filmmakers?
I would say that, and you might agree with this too, and I've talked to a lot of people about it who also agree. I would say 75% of the reason you will get called back or even called in the first place is your attitude. Right. If you have that attitude that you are willing to learn, you want to learn, you are willing to not change, but improve yourself. You're not a arrogant know-it-all. You realize that people want to teach you. It's not all them attacking you. You don't get super defensive about it. People will hire you back every single day of the week. So just always go into a job knowing that you're going to learn something today. Because if you're not learning something every single day on set, you're doing something wrong, or you're someone who's been doing the job for 30 years. And maybe if you're still passionate about filmmaking, maybe you should be finding work more challenging. Or if you're kind of like, you know what, I've done it all, I just want to kind of sit back, take the easy jobs, then perfect. You've done it all. I'm not going to judge you. But if you're just starting out, if you're not learning something every single day, you're not being a productive professional. You're just not. You need to, even me, if I'm not learning something every single day, I'm looking at myself like, why do I feel like I didn't learn anything today? Was I not paying attention? Like, come on. So
So you gave us a really great story with the situation that happened. Was there any time on set that things wasn't going as smooth as they should have been going? I know we talked about set safety situations in class, especially being in Florida with all the storms. Were there any other situations that you can name that things weren't going smooth as they should have, and how did you handle that?
So one of the worst things that happened to me on set was one of the first feature films I worked on outside of school. And it was an indie production, so everything was, of course, rushed. Everything was hectic. Everything needed to happen 30 minutes ago. So it was near the end of this production, and they started to cut corners with time, and they stopped looking for places for the crew to park. So what started happening was departments started to combine vehicles, and it would happen very quickly, and it would happen usually, oh, okay, everyone's in this vehicle. Oh, wait, never mind. We have to change minds. Everyone go in that vehicle. So something that happened was I geared up in a vehicle, got all my equipment. Then something happened split second. Oh, never mind. It's not this vehicle. It's another vehicle. This is, I think this was 1 o'clock in the morning. It was an overnight shoot. Frustrated me, gets everything out of my car, puts in the new car. And people are helping me. So we're putting stuff in the car, and we close everything up, start to back away, and we hear something fall. And of course, it was my boom pole.
What?
Which got run over by the front tire of the car.
Man.
So again, this is
at the
end of the day, this is my fault. But right. I'm like, no, this isn't 100% my fault. This is the production's fault. At least 50%. I'll take 50% of this. This is the production not being a production. This is them just going balls to the wall, chaos everywhere, telling crew to change plans. So something that I learned from that was honestly kind of how to stand up for myself and go to production and say, listen, I'm not expecting, number one, I'm like, you guys have your production, you should have insurance. Put this on your insurance. This happened. This isn't something like I was holding my boom pole and I dropped it like an idiot. This was something that happened because of your bad scheduling. Wow. I don't know if they did have insurance because they were very adamant not to put it on their insurance. So the next step was, okay, I'm going to admit that this is 50% my fault, which means I'm paying for 50% of this, and you're going to pay for 50% of this. And it took a couple days of fighting for that, but it eventually happened. Wow. So that was something that, that was pretty bad that happened. I still have, I can actually get it later on near the end. I still have the boom, where you can see like the tire mark bent in it.
Wow.
That was an expensive mistake.
Man.
But I learned to stand up for myself that day. I learned to be like, listen, I'm not taking all this blame. You guys need to plan better. Yes. You guys need to figure this out, because this was an inevitability. Something was going to break at this pace. Something was going to break with this mentality. It happened to me. It could have happened to camera. It could have happened to a light. It could have happened to a car, because someone backed into a car because of the hecticness you were putting into the crew. Wow. So, yeah.
This is crazy. And this is why it's so important as a producer to have insurance, because things like this can happen, all kind of things, accidents, all that. And so, wow, what an experience, man. You've been telling us about some dramatic experiences. I think it's time for us to talk about some great experiences, right? So tell us about your favorite experience ever on a production.
One of the jobs that I always think of whenever this comes up is I got to spend the day being a bee crew at SeaWorld for a day.
Okay.
This was during a time post Blackfish. So they were trying, which was the documentary. So they were trying to, recover their image a little bit.
Right.
Which again, completely depends on your opinion. There are some jobs that maybe I wasn't the biggest fan of SeaWorld myself, but it was a very high paying job. I needed student loans paid that month. So I said, you know what, this is a job. Someone's going to take it if it's not me. Right. So again, and that's completely up to you. And, once you become more experienced and you can say no to jobs, then maybe that's a job you say no to. But at the time I'm like, nope, this is a job I need to say yes to. But it was a really fun experience because it was the B cam. So really cool, casual, going around, getting a lot of B-roll, seeing all the behind the scenes of the animal exhibits, and talking to the people who did really care about the animals, which were the actual personal trainers of those animals. And then the people who were the trainers and people in charge of all the conservation they do here locally in Florida. And just hearing the stories and the passion that these people who were on the ground doing the work with these animals was some of the best stories I've ever heard. And just seeing the love that they constantly put into their work every single day was it was so amazing to see.
Nice.
And got to see all the behind the scenes and just, how they ran the park and, how much money they put into like the filtration systems and, feeding the animals. That was really, really cool. So that was one of my favorite jobs I've ever done.
Nice. That sounds amazing. Of course, being at the theme park is nothing. You can't go wrong being at a theme park all day.
So
right?
It was then the final day of that job is when it was time for B-roll of all of the coasters at the park. Mm-hmm. And of course, you can't really get sound of roller coasters without constant wind. So they decided that they didn't need sound that day. Luckily, they decided that fact after I already arrived for the day, which means I'm already getting paid.
I'm getting
so I became a background character that got to ride all the roller coasters for the rest of the day. And I'm like, I'm getting paid full rate to ride this roller coaster 3 times in a row. I'm like, I can't beat
that. Right. That's amazing. That's amazing. Nothing wrong with that at all. Can't beat it. So as a sound mixer in your season that you're currently in, tell us a little bit about the type of productions you're doing now. Like how many would you say at a time? Because I know you bounce around a lot. You're working with a lot of different companies. Are there any productions that you're working on now that you can tell us about?
So production that I just did last weekend was a conference for a nonprofit group of dietitians locally to Florida. And what they do is they try to help out places that are called food deserts in inner cities, which are basically places that don't have fresh produce within a certain mileage of a location. Be that because, companies that are that would supply fresh fruit or vegetables just don't find it profitable enough to, sell there. So what this group does is they actually went and started out getting a bus and transforming it into a local farmers market. And they go to all these places and either supply free or super discounted produce to these areas. Over the years, they've grown, and now I think they're up to 3 buses. And they do this. I think they try to do it every weekend, like a local farmers market. So a friend of mine, it was the producer, and they were starting or doing a conference here locally in Florida. And they wanted to kind of get behind the scenes of the conference and also just sit down interviews with all the dietitians that are in this network that do work for this nonprofit. So that's what I just did. I do a lot of stuff for Disney. I know something that's upcoming that I do every single time they do it is for Run Disney, which is the Disney marathons that happen, I think, about 4 times a year. Of course, it took a break for COVID, but now they're fully back. I think that's happening the 6th of November. Okay. And yeah, and doing a lot of stuff for like Full Sail, like on campus too. A lot of their stuff they're working on.
You're busy. Very busy.
I try.
No, I love it, man. So eventually, for our listeners out there, eventually jobs start coming in. You start getting people recommend you for a lot of jobs, especially here in Florida. And so it's kind of like a big pool of us, it's a circle of us, but a lot of us getting calls for jobs, because of recommendation, in this case. So it's a lot of great things that start to eventually pick up. Alan, for our students that are about to graduate soon, how should they prepare themselves? What advice can we give them to be ready for that working in the industry and stuff?
It's a cop-out, and I know every person says it. But it's 1000% true. One of the most important things you can do is network. You just have to, like Ron was just saying.
We always say it. Yep.
At least 85, if not 95% of every job I get is word of mouth. It's all about making that good impression. And like I said, never feel like just because you didn't make a good impression doesn't mean you didn't do a good job. Sometimes the person isn't right for you, but making those good impressions, getting people recommending you, and eventually, like I got a text is about a month ago from someone. It has been happening more regularly now. I remember the first time it ever happened. From someone who texted me and said, "Hey, I'm this person. I'm working on this project. This person recommended you." And I'm like, I don't even know that name. So I don't even know who's recommending me anymore. So it's like people are recommending me to people who recommend me. And it's like, okay, sure. So I always love that when I could just be like, "Oh yeah, I love that person," and I'm like, I have no idea. I don't know who that person is, but thank you for recommending me. That's really nice of you. So just keep at it. Network with. If you're on campus, it's a lot easier, I will say, than our online campus. I mean, our online students. On campus, talk and work with all of your students, even with peers, even with other students who aren't in your month, especially if they're further ahead, because guess what? By the time you graduate, if they're 6 months ahead of you, they've now been working for 6 months. So they now have contacts that you shouldn't have, but they're 6 months ahead of you. So now you have contacts that are 6 months ahead of you. Definitely. If you're interested in a specific department, show that you love that job to the lab specialists and course directors of that I can't think department. Sorry, couldn't think of that word. Because you know what? A lot of people really want to, especially in Full Sail, which is something I've always loved about Full Sail. Lab specialists and course directors want nothing more than to see you succeed. So if you show you have that passion, show you have that energy and that great attitude, there are a lot of course directors and especially lab specialists that will go out and, stick their neck out to give you that opportunity with a contact they know. So just network, show that you're interested, stay after class if you have a good question, stay after class if you want to learn more about that camera, want to learn more about that light, learn more about that sound mixer, and just keep showing that you're interested.
Nice. That leads kind of into my other question. Are there any resources that can help students or any graduates out there or anyone that wants to work in the sound industry? Are there any resources that you would recommend?
I know that it's something that I have dabbled in but haven't gotten a lot into. I know that there's a lot of Facebook groups that are really popular, and also some forums. Something I will warn people about the sound forums, and it's a reason I never truly got into it. And if there are sound people that listen to this, they might get mad at me. But some of the old school sound people kind of like to gatekeep a little bit. So they don't like new people entering and talking about things that they don't think you know about. So I will tell you about just the sound forums, not the Facebook groups. Those seem to be a lot more casual. But just be wary about jumping in there and trying to make new friends. They're not looking for new friends. They're it's true. They don't want new friends. But they can be a really great resource once you kind of gain their trust. Again, I'm kind of against needing to gain someone's trust in the way that they want to. So that's why I've never jumped on there. But another thing, especially for our Full Sail students, are, of course, career development tools. They are amazing at helping you with a really important thing as a sound mixer, which is your resume. Unfortunately, we can't really have anything as fancy as a demo reel like camera or directors do, because, the thing that shows that we know what we're doing is our references or people that are willing to say, yep, I've hired Alan 15 times last year. It's our repeat calls and just the list of here's everything I've worked on, which just comes down to a portfolio would be great too, just to show a list of everything, but mainly it's your resume. We can't really have this thing that's a fancy demo reel that shows really cool shots that we've done, because at the end of the day, if it sounds good, it sounds good. And that's what sound is. It's not really fancy. Now, of course, if you're a sound designer, if your job is, making really cool sound effects, then of course you have some sort of demo reel, because you're displaying, look at the talent and creativity I have. But if you're just a sound mixer, it's really showing everything you need in that resume. But that doesn't mean your resume can't be interesting. It can't be creative. It's just not as inherently creative as some other options that other departments have. So definitely career development is an amazing place to show you how to organize all that stuff, show what people are looking for out in the field. They have amazing contacts and people they talk to all the time out in the field that are researching what people are looking for. So yeah, career development's a really good tool.
Yes, and that's our career development department at Full Sail for those that are our students or graduates from Full Sail. So, Alan, while you're telling me all this, have you ever dabbled in Foley?
In Foley, no. I've recorded some. I technically, yes. I classify Foley as people who are really getting into it. I've definitely recorded footsteps to image, which is the most basic type of Foley. But actually doing Foley for a project, I've not done. I've recorded sound effects for a project. I've recorded wild lines for films. If we had an extra day, I've gone out and, got some tire screeching or, a cart slamming into side of a building, just things to try to help out post-production a little bit more. But Foley is a very, for people who might be interested in that, Foley and sound design is really where you can be creative with sound. That's where you're taking sounds that either don't exist or do exist, but you need to give it that cinematic flair. You need to make it sound, I like to say, ultra realistic, where like the famous example, of course, whenever people talking about Foley, a lot of times when you hear bones crack, it's not actually bones cracking. Number one, that's immoral to do. You should go and do that. But number two, if you do it, it kind of sounds underwhelming. So you get like things like, vegetables. A lot of people use celery, and you crack it in that perfect way, and it makes it that super ultra realistic sound. And again, that's just you experimenting. So if that's something that sounds interesting for you, sound design and Foley work, that's an amazing field. It's just a lot more limited, just because there's a small amount of people who are amazing at it, and they kind of love to do it forever. So it's a little hard to get into, but definitely look into it.
Sweet. Now, if any of our listeners are, they want to connect with you, maybe even hire you for some jobs, is there anywhere they can find you online? Are you on social media anywhere?
So sadly, my website is being overhauled because after grading the portfolios for the class me and Ron work at, I realized that, oh my gosh, my website is so under par compared to some of the things that our amazing students are doing. I'm like, oh my gosh, nope, take this down, redo it.
Wow.
But I do have my professional email at sidewoodrecording at gmail.com. And that's the name of my company, is Sidewood Recording.
Awesome, man. That's great to hear. So what final thoughts can you leave our listeners with, Mr. Alan Harris?
Final thoughts. It's going into film, you always hear the term feast or famine, which means it's either everything is happening and you have no time to do anything else. And you might even have jobs stacking on top of each other, and you can't take every job because there's only one of you. Or it's famine, which means, oh my gosh, it's been 2 months and people haven't even reached out to say hello to me. Especially starting out, that is tough. Fortunately, I was in a position that I was able to stick with it full time. I wanted to show I was dedicated. I wanted to show and give that appearance of, nope, I'm in this for the long run. So I was able to stick with it, but that doesn't mean that that's what is your path. Just because you might have to pick up that side job or do that extra thing, if you feel like you still want to do this industry, you need to keep doing it, because one day it's just going to click. And it's all about the relationships you make, and it's all about the reputation you build. So keep at it, keep going, prepare for those famines, try to keep, if you can, whenever there's going to be times where you build up, some extra money, and you're going to be tempted to buy that extra lens or get that extra lav or buy that extra light. But maybe put it in the bank account for the month that you can't find a job, because that will happen, and it happens to all of us. And as you grow, the time periods get shorter and shorter. But even fully established people can tell there'll be sometimes where it goes a couple weeks where it just is crickets, and then you're like, has everyone forgotten about me? Like, what's happening? And that's just the industry. That's just the way that, especially here in Central Florida, there's a lot less productions for kind of creative purposes. It's a lot more corporate driven. So that's just the way money moves from businesses. And even in a creative world, a lot of the time, especially independent features, it's all about investors. So even then, it's just the way that money moves around. There might be times in that just there's no extra money for people to go and give, give funding to that indie project of one of their friends. So just keep with it. Just because you might have to take up a part-time job or even a full-time job, don't consider yourself out of the industry. That's just a season. Keep your ears to the ground. Keep talking to your references. Keep talking to your people, and make it clear that you're still doing it, even though you might not be doing it that second, because that is most of the time that perception of you being like, nope, I'm in the industry. Just give me a call. I'm ready to go. Is all it takes. And people are like, oh, okay, here, I'm going to book you up for the next 3 weeks. And you're like, oh, shoot, how am I going to do this?
Right. Man, that's amazing, man. Alan, my final thoughts for you, my brother, is you're an amazing individual to work with. I'm truly excited that you're part of our Full Self family and the digital cinematography program. And brother, I can't wait to work with you on set. That's what I'm looking forward to. I already know it's going to be a match made. We're going to be rolling. We're going to be doing a lot of great projects. So I'm looking forward to that, man. Thank you again for being on the show, Ronald Just a Second podcast. I look forward to working with you more in the future, man. All right. Take care, man. I really appreciate you being here for this show.